Hi, I'm Emily. I'll be your storyteller today. Many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Also, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable. Close your eyes and let the sound of the rain guide you into the story. The rain had been falling steadily for hours when I finally spotted the faded neon sign that read, Hollow Pines Inn. It flickered weakly against the dark, storm-washed sky like it was struggling to stay alive. Wind pushed at the sides of my car, and the wipers barely kept up with the relentless downpour. I was cold, exhausted, and my GPS had long since given up, rerouting me in endless circles through unfamiliar roads. When the old hotel appeared out of the fog, it felt less like a destination and more like a last resort. I pulled into the gravel lot, my tires crunching wet stones, and cut the engine. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit and smelled of damp wood and stale flowers. A grandfather clock ticked slowly in the corner, and behind the desk stood an older man, with hollow cheeks and a gentle, unreadable smile. He greeted me without asking for my name, as though he had been expecting me. I handed over my card, but he didn't swipe it. "Storm brought you in?" he asked. I nodded, trying to shake the chill from my shoulders. "Just passing through. Need a place for the night." His smile never widened. "Room 3113, said, sliding a heavy brass key across the counter. The elevator creaked as it climbed to the third floor, each floor groaning under its own weight. The hallway outside was oddly quiet, muffled by thick carpeting and the hum of distant thunder. Room 313 stood at the end of a long corridor, flanked by faded paintings and a single flickering sconce. As I turned the key, I noticed something strange. The numbers on the door looked newer than the rest of the hotel, like they had been added recently. The handle turned smoothly, and the door opened without a sound. The scent of lavender and old paper drifted out to greet me. The room was small, but cozy. A 4-poster bed stood against the wall, its canopy draped in sheer fabric that fluttered, slightly, despite the absence of wind. An antique vanity sat beneath a wide oval mirror, and a fireplace flickered faintly with orange light that cast shadows across the patterned rug. I dropped my suitcase by the door and towed off my wet shoes, grateful to be out of the storm. Still, something about the room felt slightly off, like I'd walked into a space that remembered things I hadn't lived. As I settled onto the edge of the bed, the storm outside intensified, thunder rolling in slow, heavy waves. I heard a soft tap, tap, tap from somewhere behind me. I turned quickly, scanning the room. Nothing. Then I heard it again, coming from the large armoire near the corner. It was closed, but the sound was unmistakable. Something was knocking from inside. I stood slowly, my breath catching in my throat, straining to hear through the rain and silence. The tapping had stopped, but I wasn't sure I was alone. The fireplace crackled softly, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. I moved closer to the armoire, each step creaking slightly on the wooden floor. My fingers hovered above the handle, hesitant. "It's just the wood settling," I whispered to myself, though even I didn't believe it. The tapping hadn't resumed, but the air felt denser near the wardrobe, as if it held its breath, waiting. Finally, I backed away, deciding to leave it closed. I told myself it was silly to be scared. Just a long day. Just an old building. I turned on the bedside lamp and pulled back the covers, trying to shake off the unease that clung to my skin, like the dampness of the storm. As I slipped under the sheets, I noticed something strange on the nightstand. A small porcelain figurine, delicately carved, a woman in a long dress, stood facing the bed. I hadn't seen it when I came in. Had it always been there? I reached out and turned it slightly, pointing it away, then turned off the lamp. Darkness settled like a second blanket, heavy and full of unseen weight. Sleep didn't come easily. The storm outside howled and groaned, the wind rattling the old windows like someone trying to get in. Every now and then, the chandelier above let out a soft metallic clink, like it was swaying even though the air remained still. I listened to every creak and groan of the building, cataloging the unfamiliar noises. I was used to sleeping alone, but this room didn't feel empty. It felt patient, like it was waiting for me to stop noticing things, waiting for me to close my eyes. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke with a start to absolute silence. The storm had stopped. The rain, the thunder, all of it. Gone. I blinked into the dark, disoriented. The air was too still, too silent. Even the fireplace had gone cold. As I sat up, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The porcelain figurine was facing me again, right at the edge of the nightstand, closer than before. I hadn't touched it. I turned on the lamp with trembling fingers. The light flickered once, twice, then steadied. I stared at the figurine, then picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. On the base, carved in delicate cursive, was a name. Clara. I set it face down, not caring if it broke. Then I noticed the mirror. The oval vanity mirror, now fogged slightly, though the room was cold. There, on the glass, was a faint, smeared handprint. Small, like a child's. And I hadn't touched the mirror since I arrived. I stepped closer to the vanity, heart hammering against my ribs. The handprint was unmistakable. 5 distinct fingers streaked faintly across the mirror's fogged surface. But I hadn't seen it before I turned off the light, and no one else had entered the room. I raised my own hand to compare the size. Smaller. Much smaller. Maybe a child's. I suddenly felt like I was being watched, like something had left the print not as a threat, but as a message, or worse, an introduction. A soft creak behind me made me spin around. The armoire again. It stood quiet, its heavy doors shut tight. I took one step toward it, then another. The handle was cold under my fingers, colder than the rest of the room. I opened it slowly, half expecting something to leap out. But there was nothing. Just a few wire hangers and a thick layer of dust on the wood floor inside. I was about to close it when I noticed something at the back. A panel, slightly ajar, as if it had been pulled loose. I crouched down, examining the panel. It looked like part of the original woodwork, but behind it was a dark gap, like a crawl space. A draft of air slipped through it, smelling faintly of mildew and old perfume. I reached in with my phone's flashlight and saw a folded piece of paper tucked into the corner. I hesitated, then pulled it out carefully. It was brittle, yellowed with age, the edges flaking at my touch. The handwriting was elegant but trembling, written in blue ink. It said only, "Don't forget what you promised, Clara." A rush of cold moved through me, like the room exhaled. I stood quickly, crumpling the note in my hand. How could anyone have known that name? That figurine? That mirror? I backed away from the armoire, heart pounding in my throat. I tried to shake off the fear, tried to be rational. But rational thoughts had left me the moment I found a handprint on glass I hadn't touched. Something was wrong with this room. I needed to leave. I moved quickly to the door. It didn't open. I twisted the handle again, harder this time, but it refused to budge. I unlocked it, relocked it, tried everything, but the door stayed firm, as if it no longer led anywhere. My breath quickened. The walls felt tighter, closer. I turned toward the window. Rain had returned, heavy now, streaking the glass. But it wasn't the parking lot I saw outside. It wasn't the gravel or the neon sign. It was a row of black umbrellas, dozens of them, motionless, lining a narrow path that led into dense, unfamiliar woods, and not a single person beneath them. I staggered back from the window, my breath fogging the glass. The umbrellas didn't move. No wind, no sway, just a perfect row, like mourners at a funeral frozen in time. My reflection hovered faintly in the pane, but something felt off. I leaned closer. Behind my reflection, over my shoulder, a shadow stood where none should have been. I spun around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. The shadow was gone. Or it had never left. The light above flickered once, then steadied, but the air had changed, heavier, as if the room were breathing with me or against me. I reached for my phone, thinking to call the front desk, to call anyone, but the screen was black, dead. No signal, no battery. I knew I'd charged it before I arrived. I opened the drawer beside the bed looking for a hotel phone. But there was only one thing inside. Another figurine. A second Clara. Same face, same dress. But this one was broken. Its porcelain head lay beside its feet, cracked down the middle. I couldn't stay in the room. I had to get out. I ran back to the door and pounded on it, shouting for help, not caring if I sounded crazy. The walls seemed to absorb the sound like insulation soaked with silence. No footsteps, no voices, no one came. Thunder cracked suddenly, directly overhead, rattling the ceiling. The chandelier swayed gently above me, on its own this time, no wind. Its crystals clinked together softly, like applause from something watching. And then came the whisper. Faint, feminine, just behind. My ear? Welcome back. I turned to find nothing but the stillness of the room. The fire had extinguished itself. The mirror had fogged completely. I stumbled back toward the bed, unsure of what to do. That's when I heard the knock again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from inside the armoire. But this time, they were followed by something else. A scrape, like fingernails dragging across wood. Then a voice, muffled but clear. Don't forget me. The lights went out. And the last thing I saw in the mirror, before everything went black, was myself sleeping in the bed. I woke up to the sound of rain again, though it was different this time. Softer, like a distant memory. For a brief moment, I forgot where I was. The sheets were twisted around me, damp with sweat. The fireplace was cold. I sat up slowly, heart heavy in my chest, trying to separate dream from reality. The figurine still lay shattered beside the nightstand. The armoire stood shut. Nothing moved. But the feeling hadn't gone. That dense pressure in the air. The quiet, unnatural stillness. I got dressed quickly, eager to leave the room, to find someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. I yanked open the door, half expecting it to resist again, but it opened without a sound. The hallway stretched before me, empty. But something was off. The wallpaper was wrong. It had been floral yesterday, soft, faded roses. Now it was dark green with vertical gold stripes. The carpet, too, had changed, thicker, redder, muffling my footsteps almost completely. And the lights were all off, except one, flickering, at the very end of the corridor. I walked slowly, every sense alert. The hallway was longer than I remembered, impossibly so. More doors now. Different numbers. Room 307, 308. But no 313. My door was gone. I turned to look behind me, to find my way back. Nothing. Just the hallway continuing on, featureless and strange. A cold breeze brushed past me, though no windows were open. It smelled faintly of ash and something sweet, like old perfume left too long in a closed drawer. The floor creaked behind me. I froze, then turned. A man stood halfway down the hall, his back to me. Dressed in a bellhop's uniform from another era, dark burgundy, brass buttons, polished shoes. He held something in his gloved hand, a room key dangling by a tarnished tag. Slowly, he turned his head, not his body, just his head. His eyes met mine, pale and cloudy, like glass. He smiled faintly. "You've changed rooms," he said, his voice distant, muffled, like it passed through water. "But the room hasn't changed you. Not yet." Before I could reply, he turned and walked away, key swinging with each step. I hurried after him, heart racing, footsteps swallowed by the thick carpet. But when I reached the corner where he had turned, there was nothing. Just another endless hallway stretching into soft darkness. The sound of footsteps faded behind the walls. I called out, but no answer came. And when I turned again to retrace my steps, I saw it. My door. 313. Back at the far end. But now it was different. Paint peeling, brass numbers tarnished, and faint scratch marks on the frame. I didn't want to go back, but the hallway offered no other path. Every door I tried was locked, some with rusted knobs that crumbled in. My hand. I moved slowly toward room 313 again, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, or maybe fatigue. But as I reached for the handle, I saw something that stopped me cold, carved just beneath the number plate. So faint, it was nearly invisible, were 5 letters scratched into the wood. Leave. The grooves were jagged, uneven, desperate. My fingers hovered over the marks. I knocked on the door first, lightly. One tap, then another. No answer. Just silence, and the low hum of the storm outside. I tried the key, still in my pocket. It turned without resistance. The door opened with a slow creak, revealing the room exactly as I'd left it. The broken figurine, the cold fireplace, the mirror, now wiped clean, reflecting only me. I stepped inside, half expecting the door to slam behind me, but it didn't. It closed softly, like a sigh, and the rain picked up again, now louder, as if it had been waiting for my return. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the mirror. My reflection stared back, eyes darker than they should be. I looked tired, drawn, like something had drained the color from my skin. I opened the drawer again. Empty. The second figurine was gone. Only dust remained. I searched the room inch by inch. No new messages, no notes. Just that same humming presence beneath the silence, like the room itself was breathing. I looked, up, and jumped. The man in the bellhop uniform was reflected in the mirror, standing behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty. The mirror returned to normal, reflecting nothing but my panic. I moved toward the door, reaching for the handle, but it was gone. The door was still there, but the knob, the lock, everything, gone. Just a smooth panel of wood. I ran my hands over it, pressed against it. No give, no seams. The door had sealed itself. I was inside now, not as a guest, as something else. That's when I noticed it. A new item on the vanity. A thin, dusty ledger with a cracked leather cover. I hadn't seen it before. It hadn't been there. I opened it carefully. Inside were names, written in neat cursive, one after the other. Page after page. Some had dates. Some had small notes beside them. Didn't leave. Tried the window. Still here. My hands trembled as I flipped through faster and faster, until I found it. My name, written in fresh ink, and next to it, a date. Tomorrow. I slammed the ledger shut and backed away, my breath catching, in my throat. My name. Not just scribbled hastily, but written with care, with purpose. The ink still glistened faintly under the lamp. Tomorrow. As if the room had already decided something I hadn't agreed to. I felt watched again, as though eyes pressed against the wallpaper from behind. I turned slowly, expecting to find someone, standing in the corner. But nothing had changed, except everything had. I rushed to the window, hoping the view might anchor me back to reality. But what I saw outside was no longer the hotel parking lot. The umbrellas were gone. In their place stood a narrow cobblestone street lined with gas lamps that flickered blue in the mist. Shapes moved between them, slow and shadowy, like people pacing without direction. Fog clung to the ground like a shroud. The landscape beyond the window didn't just look old, it looked wrong. As if it had been painted by someone who remembered life, but never lived it. I turned from the window just in time to hear a faint scratching at the vanity. I crept toward it, each step uncertain. The mirror had fogged again, but this time, something was being written in the condensation, letter by letter, slowly, as though traced by an invisible fingertip. Don't trust the bellhop. The words shimmered briefly, then vanished. I stood frozen, unsure what was more terrifying, that something had written the message, or that it had done so to help me. A knock came from the wall, low and deliberate. Not the door. The wall, right behind the mirror. I pressed my ear to it, listening. A soft shuffle, then something that sounded like breathing. I stepped back, heart pounding. and the mirror began to rattle slightly in its frame. Dust trickled from the top corners. The entire room felt like it was waiting, like a held breath, and I realized whatever was behind that mirror wasn't trying to break in. It was trying to get out. I grabbed the mirror's frame and pulled. It didn't budge at first, but then it gave a little, as if unhooked from behind. I heaved again, and the whole piece slid forward, revealing not drywall, but a hollow space, a narrow passage. Dark, tight. The scent that hit me was overpowering. Mildew, perfume, and something metallic beneath it all. I shined my flashlight into the space. Just ahead, the passage turned sharply, disappearing into shadow. My instincts screamed not to enter, but something inside whispered otherwise. If you want answers, follow. I hesitated at the threshold, one foot inside the hollow behind the mirror, the other rooted in the false safety of the room. The passage pulsed with a strange energy, a vibration I could feel in my bones rather than hear. I reached forward, brushing the wall for support. The surface was damp, uneven, covered in small ridges, like old wallpaper peeled back over bone. Each step into the passage felt like entering the throat of something alive. The air thickened the farther I moved. My flashlight flickered twice, then steadied, casting long, distorted shadows. The turn came quickly, sharp and sudden, revealing a door. Small, wooden, and marked with a number burned into the grain. 31212. I stared at it, hand trembling as I reached for the handle. It was warm, uncomfortably so. The moment I touched it, the humming I'd felt through the walls surged, like the hotel itself had noticed me. I turned the knob. Inside was a single chair and a desk. On the desk sat a photograph in a brass frame. It was me, standing in front of Hollow Pines Inn, smiling, luggage in hand, but I hadn't taken that photo. I'd never stood like that, never posed for it. I stepped closer, trying to see the background more clearly. The date in the corner read, October 13th, 1971. My breath caught. That wasn't just before I arrived. It was 50 years ago. I hadn't even been born. The light flickered again and cut out completely. In the pitch black, I heard the door close behind me with a soft click. Then came a sound like cloth dragging across wood. Slow, steady. I fumbled for the flashlight, but it wouldn't respond. Something moved behind me, air displaced by motion. A whisper tickled my ear, not spoken aloud, but placed directly in my mind. You're early. I spun around, hands outstretched, but touched nothing. Only cold, only air. And then a light returned, not from my flashlight, but from a lamp on the desk. The photograph was gone. In its place was a guest book, open to the last page. My name was no longer next in line. It was the final entry, and written beneath it, in looping script, were 3 words. You never left. The storm outside roared to life again, rattling the walls, and behind the mirror I had entered through came a voice I recognized, my own, crying to be let out. I don't know how I got back to room 313. One moment I was staring at the guest book in that half room, half memory, and the next, I was waking up in the same bed as before, cold sweat clinging to my skin. Rain tapped softly on the window. The mirror was back in place, the vanity clean. For a brief second, I wondered if it had all been a nightmare, But then I saw it, etched into the fogged glass of the mirror, as if traced by a finger while I slept. You walked through it. There was a knock at the door. Sharp, sudden. I jumped. I hesitated before answering, heart pounding, but something made me move. I opened it slowly. A maid stood there, mid-40s maybe. Neat uniform, pale skin, no name tag. She smiled pleasantly, though her eyes never quite met mine. "Fresh towels, miss?" she said, holding a folded stack in her arms. Her voice was flat, rehearsed. I nodded silently and stepped aside. She moved into the room without hesitation, as if she'd been there many times before. She placed the towels on the chair and turned to me. "You left the window open again," she said gently, pointing. I looked. It was closed. "The storm likes to get in," she added, smoothing the fabric of her apron. I opened my mouth to ask her name, but she was already walking to the vanity, straightening objects that hadn't moved. Then she paused, her fingers hovering over the mirror. "They always look for the wrong face first," she whispered. I blinked. "Sorry?" She smiled again, too wide this time. "Don't worry, it will show you eventually." She walked toward the door, her shoes silent on the rug. As she reached for the handle, I asked, "Do you know what happened to the last guest in this room?" Her hand froze midair. A flicker crossed her face, something like a memory, or grief, or fear. "Some things stay," she said softly, still facing the door. "Others forget they ever left." Then she stepped out and pulled the door shut behind her. I stood in place for a long time, unsure if I had just spoken with a woman or a ghost. I turned to the mirror again. The fog had cleared. My reflection looked back at me, unchanged. But as I leaned closer, something shifted. Just for a second, barely a blink. My eyes in the reflection didn't move when I did. They stared back at me, slightly off-center. My head tilted right. The reflection tilted left. It wasn't a trick of the glass. It wasn't me. It was watching, studying, waiting. I stepped back from the mirror, heart hammering in my chest. The reflection reset instantly, my movements sinking again like nothing had happened. But I knew what I saw. I knew the delay hadn't been imagined. The room felt colder now, as if it resented my awareness. I sat at the edge of the bed, trying to steady my breathing. My fingers itched to open the vanity drawer again, but fear held them still. The storm outside hadn't stopped. It never stopped. Eventually, curiosity won. I stood and approached the mirror once more. Its surface was clean and smooth now, almost too perfect, like it had been replaced. I reached out and pressed my fingertip to the glass. Cold, solid, real. But the moment my skin touched it, something pulsed through the surface, like a heartbeat responding to mine. I yanked my hand back. A faint outline remained where my finger had been slowly fading but not disappearing entirely. The drawer opened with the same hesitant creak as before. Inside, folded carefully, was a photograph, not there earlier. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a picture of the maid, only younger, her hair longer, dressed in a style decades old. She stood in front of room 313, smiling beside another woman. The other woman was me, or someone who looked like me. The resemblance was haunting. A note on the back read, "For Clara. I'll remember next time." I dropped the photo. It landed face down, as if ashamed of itself. A gust of wind pushed against the window from the outside, though there were no open seams. The chandelier above me swayed once more, casting strange shadows that danced across the walls. One of them moved in a way the others didn't. It swirled upward, pausing just beside the mirror, where it pressed flat, merging with its surface. I stared in frozen silence as a faint outline appeared behind the glass. A face, not mine. Hollow-eyed, lips parted, as if whispering. Then came the sound. Soft, unmistakable. The maid humming. The same tune I heard when she walked in earlier. Only now it came from inside the room, though I was alone. The tune echoed gently, bouncing from corner to corner. I turned in slow circles, following nothing. My pulse drummed against my ears. When I looked back to the mirror, there was no face. No fog. Just my reflection again. But now, written across the glass in lipstick, were the words, "Next time, remember me." I backed away from the mirror, the words seared into my mind like a warning or a plea. I hadn't touched any lipstick. I hadn't brought any. And yet, the handwriting was delicate, familiar, curved just like mine. I wiped the message with a towel, but the red smear only spread, becoming a crude shape. A circle. A figure. 2 eyes and a slash of a mouth. A face. My face. I dropped the towel, heart pounding, and stumbled toward the door. I yanked at the handle, hoping maybe this time it would open, but it didn't. It never did when I needed it to. The brass was warm beneath my hand, like skin. I turned back to the room. The humming had stopped. The mirror was clean again. The chandelier above swayed just slightly, as if someone had left the room moments ago. I approached the vanity once more, drawn by something I couldn't name. I didn't want to look. I needed to. The mirror showed me again. But this time I was standing in the hallway outside room 313. The camera angle was tilted, low to the floor, as if the viewpoint came from something crawling. I wore the same clothes I had on now, but my expression was blank. Eyes wide, mouth open slightly, like someone who'd just remembered a terrible truth. I blinked, and the image in the mirror shifted. Now I was in bed, sleeping. Something crouched at the foot of the bed, watching. My breath caught. I looked to the bed behind me. Empty. The room around me felt smaller somehow. The walls a shade darker. The rug wet. I stepped closer. Yes. Damp beneath my feet. Like it had rained here. The sound of dripping came from the ceiling, though there was no leak. A drop splashed onto my arm. Icy. Sharp. I looked up and saw it. Water pooling above the bed. Suspended. Defying gravity. As if the storm had turned inward. I moved back toward the door again. But this time, the maid was there. Standing silently, inside the room, beside the mirror. I hadn't heard the door. Her face was blank. Her hands were clasped in front of her. "You remember now," she said. But it wasn't a question. "You always do." My throat tightened. "Remember what?" I asked. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a moment I saw something ripple across her face. Age, pain, time unraveling. that you've been here before," she whispered. "And you promised you'd never leave me behind." The air thickened, humid like breath trapped in a glass. I took a step toward her, but she didn't move. "Who are you?" I asked, voice dry. Her lips parted slowly, as though answering required effort. "You called me Clara once," she said, eyes distant. "But I think you've forgotten what that meant." I shook my head, confusion turning to dread. "I'm not Clara," I whispered. "I don't even know you." She smiled again. That terrible, tired smile. "You will. You always do, eventually." She reached toward the mirror, placing her hand flat against it. A ripple spread across the surface, like water touched by a falling leaf. Her fingers passed through, disappearing, into the glass. "Come," she said without turning. "It's almost time." I stepped back, heart hammering. Time for what? Her reflection looked at me from the other side, even though she still stood in the room. There were two of her now, one with eyes like grief, the other with eyes like mine. The room trembled subtly, the chandelier swaying again. On the vanity, the drawer opened on its own with a creak that split the silence. Inside was a key, not brass like before, but blackened iron, cold and slick with condensation. A tag dangled from it, aged and worn, with barely legible letters. The room below. The maid's voice came from behind me, though I hadn't seen her move. "You found it last time. You just didn't go far enough." My hands trembled as I picked up the key. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. Thunder cracked so loud, it rattled the vanity mirror, knocking over a glass perfume bottle. The air was drenched in the scent. Something old, something floral, something decayed. I turned to ask her what she meant, but she was gone. Vanished. Only the scent remained. I rushed to the hallway. Open now. The door stood ajar. The corridor beyond flooded with a pulsing amber glow. The wallpaper flickered like firelight, shadows sliding across it like hands. I stepped into the hall. The mirror behind me no longer reflected the room. It showed the hotel lobby, empty, dark, except for one flickering bulb above the front desk. I looked back once more. The room was different now. Dusty, abandoned, like it hadn't been touched in decades. A single line was written across the vanity mirror in what looked like dried blood. "Remember next time." I didn't know if it was a warning, a plea, or a command. I took the key and walked toward the stairs. I had to know what was waiting below. The stairwell was colder than the hallway, the air thick with dust and old smoke. My footsteps echoed on each wooden step as I descended, the black iron key clenched tightly in my hand. The walls narrowed as I went lower, the light above fading, until it was nothing but a faint glow behind me. I didn't know where this staircase was on the hotel map, if it was even on any map at all. It spiraled down, past logic, past time, into something older than the building itself. At the bottom, I found a narrow hallway lit by gas sconces that hissed faintly as if alive. The wallpaper here was dark red, peeling in long strips like dead skin. The floor creaked beneath every step, and the scent of mildew clung to everything. I walked slowly, guided by instinct more than understanding. There were doors on either side of me, heavy wooden ones with frosted glass windows, none marked, all locked, all except one. At the end of the hall, Just beneath a crooked exit sign was a door bearing a tarnished brass plate. Storage, 313B. The key turned easily, in the lock. I opened the door to find a wide, low-ceilinged room filled with dusty furniture and stacks of yellowed linens. The air was heavy with disuse. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, its chain clinking gently as it swayed. As I stepped inside, something shifted. Not the furniture, not the light. Something deeper. The air changed, becoming warmer, heavier. The scent of lavender returned, mixing now with the sharp bite of old tobacco. The same perfume from room 313, but stronger, like memory made scent. At the center of the room stood a large arched mirror, not like the vanity upstairs. This one was older, taller, framed in black wood etched with strange symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. My own reflection looked warped, stretched vertically, as if gravity behaved differently here. I moved closer. My reflection didn't copy me exactly. It was delayed by a heartbeat, then another, then stopped altogether. I raised my hand. She didn't. She only watched. Suddenly the lights buzzed and dimmed. A faint voice called out behind me. Male. Soft. You're not supposed to be here. I turned quickly, heart in my throat. A man stood just inside the doorway, dressed in what looked like a 1940s military uniform. His eyes were hollow, sunken. Yet his voice was kind, almost apologetic. You opened the wrong door, he said. And now, it remembers you. I took a step back. What do you mean? But he only shook his head, fading slowly, like breath on glass. I stared at the spot where the soldier had stood. Nothing remained, not even a footprint in the dust. The mirror pulsed again, and for a moment, I thought I heard a voice. My voice, whispering my name from within the glass. I turned back toward it, drawn despite myself. The surface shimmered faintly, and now the reflection had changed again. It showed the room, yes, but not as it was now. It was cleaner, lit by sunlight, alive. People moved in the background, maids, guests, laughter echoing faintly from beyond the frame. I stepped closer, mesmerized. A woman crossed the reflected room. She wore a long blue dress and pinned-up hair. I didn't recognize her at first, until she turned to face me. It was me, or some version of me. Her movements were fluid, her eyes distant. She stopped in front of the mirror on the other side and reached forward. I mirrored her, our palms nearly touching, separated by time, by something far stranger than glass. Then she mouthed something, 3 words, slow, deliberate. Don't trust it. A loud knock tore me from the trance. I turned. The door I had entered through was closed again, though I hadn't touched it. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass. Then another. Multiple shapes. Slow. Steady. Like people pacing. In silence. The knob turned but didn't open. I held my breath, waiting. They didn't try again. The hallway beyond fell silent. I stepped forward, gently pressing my ear to the door. I heard breathing on the other side. Human. Close. Listening back. I turned quickly and scanned the room, searching for another way out. There was nothing. Only the furniture, the linen stacks, and the mirror. I stepped back toward it, desperate. The image had changed again. Now it showed room 313, empty, still, but something crawled across the ceiling, barely visible, dark and long-limbed, clinging to the corners where the walls met. It stopped, slowly turning its face toward the mirror, toward me. It had no eyes, just a mouth, grinning. The light above flickered, then blew out entirely, plunging the room into darkness. I froze. Behind me, something shifted. Furniture creaking, linen rustling, a soft footfall on old wood. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. Then a whisper rose in the dark, close to my ear. Not hostile, not angry, just sad. They always leave me behind. The mirror flared suddenly to life with a cold, blue light. In its surface, I saw not myself, but dozens of faces, all women, all me, staring, trapped. I stumbled backward, away from the mirror, the ghostly light still illuminating the room in shifting shades of blue and gray. The faces didn't blink. They didn't move. They only stared, each expression slightly different. Fear, sorrow, rage, resignation. I felt like I was standing at the edge of myself, as if all my forgotten versions had gathered to watch what I would do next. The weight of their silence pressed down on me, cold and suffocating. My name echoed faintly from the glass, but no lips moved. I dropped to my knees, hands trembling. "What do you want from me?" I whispered aloud. The faces in the mirror flickered once, then vanished. The room went black again. Only the sound of the rain filtered in now, steady, relentless, as if it too had always known this place. I crawled toward the wall, searching for the door in the dark. My fingers scraped the wood. Nothing. Just smooth, unbroken surface, like it had never been a door at all. Something shifted in the air. A warmth pressed against my back, just for a second, like someone standing too close. I froze. Then a single word was exhaled into the dark. "Remember." I turned sharply, but there was no one there. No shadow, no figure. Only the soft creak of wood as the arched mirror behind me began to tilt, as if pulled from the other side. It fell slowly, landing face down with a muffled crash that sent a gust of cold wind through the room. Light returned suddenly, dim, yellow, and flickering, from the bulb overhead. The room looked unchanged, yet completely wrong. The dust was thicker, the linens older, rotted in places. The walls now bore water damage in strange patterns, like vines or veins. And where the mirror had landed, the floor was cracked, splintered, out like a spider web. Beneath the broken boards, I saw something glint. Metal. Another key. I reached for it, hesitant, my fingers brushing against something soft, something that moved. I pulled back quickly, heart racing. The metal object rolled into view. A key, yes, but attached to a tag made of leather. Faded letters spelled out Clara, 1922. My vision blurred. The scent of lavender returned, stronger than ever. I clutched the key, its coldness grounding me for a moment. And then I heard the door again. It creaked open slowly, impossibly, on its own. The hallway beyond was not the one I had come from. It was older, flickering with candlelight. And someone was standing there in the shadows, waiting for me. The figure didn't move at first, just stood there, half lit, a silhouette framed by flickering candlelight. I stepped closer, the key still gripped tightly in my palm. As I crossed the threshold, the air changed again, thicker, older. The carpet beneath my feet was worn and threadbare, patterned in a design I vaguely recognized. When the figure finally stepped into view, my breath caught. It was the maid, Clara, but not as I'd seen her before. She looked younger now, and deeply afraid. "You shouldn't have come this far," she said softly, her voice trembling as if resisting the words. "The deeper you go, the more it remembers." I glanced down at the key again. "Is this yours?" I asked. She looked at it, then at me, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or regret. "It was," she said, "before I became part of it." Her eyes shimmered under the candlelight. "And before you made your promise, I wanted to demand answers, to scream, to run. But all I managed was a whisper. What did I promise?" She didn't respond with words. Instead, she stepped aside, revealing the corridor behind her. At the very end stood another door, wood warped by age, carved with the number 0. The brass knob pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat beneath metal. "The room remembers," she said again. "But memory here doesn't keep things safe. It keeps them trapped." The corridor grew darker with each step I took. The candlelight behind me dimmed, swallowed by the shadows. I reached the door and pressed my ear against it. Faint sounds filtered through. Laughter, soft weeping, something like a lullaby sung out of tune. I turned the knob. It was warm, familiar. And just before I opened it, Clara's voice echoed one last time from far behind me. "If you step inside, you may never know which version of you comes back out." I opened the door and stepped through. The moment the door closed behind me, the storm above roared like thunder in my chest. The hallway vanished. The past folded in on itself, and the only thing ahead now was the next room. The room was dark, darker than any I had entered before. The kind of darkness that feels old, buried deep beneath years of silence. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that I wasn't alone. Candles lined the walls, flickering gently, though no breeze touched them. At the center of the room was a large desk, carved from black wood and covered in dust. Behind it, a high-backed chair faced away from me, unmoving. I stepped closer, the sound of my shoes muffled by the thick rug beneath me. As I approached, the chair creaked faintly, and I stopped. "Hello?" I whispered. No answer. The room felt colder now, but not dead, waiting. On the desk lay a massive ledger, its leather cover cracked and curled at the edges. The binding was reinforced with iron bands that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. I reached forward and opened it. Dust lifted into the air, swirling briefly before settling again. The pages inside were yellowed and fragile, but the ink looked fresh. Each line listed a name, a room number, and a date. Names I didn't recognize. Dates that spanned over a century. Some entries had notes beside them. Checked out. Still inside. Lost in the walls. I flipped carefully, searching for something, anything that made sense. Then I stopped. My fingers, froze on a name near the bottom of the current page. Clara Bell. Room 313, November 1922. Next to her name in blood red ink, one word. Retained. I turned the page and found more recent names. 2 recent. One from 1971, another from 1987, then 2003, all listed with the same room number, 313. Most had no departure date. Just a line of red. Retained. And then, on the next page, my name. The ink was still wet. The pen used still rested in the spine of the book. No room number next to mine. No note. Just empty space, waiting. My hands began to shake. I didn't remember signing anything. I didn't remember checking in. Behind me, the chair creaked again. Slowly, it turned. An old man sat in it now, dressed in a tattered hotel uniform, skin the color of ash, lips thin and gray. His eyes were glassy, unmoving, yet he spoke without blinking. "Everyone signs eventually," he said, "whether they know it or not." I backed away, but his voice followed. "The room chooses, the ledger records, but the ones who stay..." He smiled barely. "They write the rest." I stared at him, unable to speak. His presence felt wrong, like a memory given form. The candlelight didn't quite touch his skin. It bent around him, like he absorbed it. I looked back at the ledger, now noticing that several of the names had small inked symbols beside them. One resembled a door, another, a mirror. A third looked like an eye. The old man followed my gaze. "These are not just names," he said slowly. "They are echoes. Recordings of those the hotel has remembered and refused to release." I flipped back to Clara's entry. Her name was circled, in faint pencil, and beneath it, in small print, a phrase had been added recently. Memory destabilizing. I didn't know what it meant, but the moment I read it, the air grew colder. "She's still here, isn't she?" I asked, voice low. The man didn't answer right away. His head tilted slightly, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he nodded once. "She chose to wait, you chose to forget, and yet, here you are." A chair scraped behind me. I turned quickly. There was now a second one across from the desk, empty, as if inviting me to sit. "You want me to write something?" I asked, cautious. "No," he said, folding his hands atop the ledger. "I want you to remember. Writing only seals it." The room pulsed once like the walls breathed in unison. Candlelight dimmed, and for a moment, the desk, the floor, even the air shimmered. Not like light, but like a page being turned. A bell rang faintly in the distance. Not electronic, not mechanical. It was the sound of a small handheld service. Bell. Old. Delicate. The man's expression shifted. "Another guest has arrived," he murmured. "It never stops." I stood up, trembling. "I don't want to be part of this." His eyes followed me with a slowness that felt inhuman. "You already are. The question is whether you'll finish your stay, or become part of the ledger." As I turned to leave, something caught my eye on the floor behind the desk. A second book, smaller, bound in cloth, locked with a rusted clasp. I bent to pick it up, ignoring the man's faint protest. "That's not for you," he said, but his voice was softer now. I turned the book over. My initials were carved into the back cover, and between the pages something peeked out. An old photograph. I pulled it free, heart pounding. It was me and Clara, younger, laughing, standing in front of room 313. On the back, a single sentence. This time, don't forget. My fingers trembled as I turned the cloth-bound book over in my hands. It smelled of old cedar and dust, but the scent was familiar, almost comforting. The initials carved into the back looked like they had been scratched with something dull and desperate. CB. But the shape of the letters had changed with time. Some strokes looked like mine. Others, like someone else was trying to match my handwriting. I opened the book to the middle. Pages and pages of entries written in different hands, as if multiple people had kept it. People who shared a life, a room, or a curse. One entry was dated 1922. It described a woman checking into room 313 during a thunderstorm after her train was delayed. She had been given a key that didn't match any door in the registry. I read on, breath catching with each line. She wrote about dreams of other versions of herself, of mirrors that showed lives she hadn't lived, of a girl who called her mother in the halls at night. The entry ended abruptly, torn mid-sentence. The next page was blank. The ink from the previous lines had bled through, like the memory was trying to escape. The old man stood now, moving slowly from behind the desk. He didn't walk so much as glide, his feet dragging softly across the rug. "You're not reading stories," he said. "You're reading recordings. Wounds written down." He extended his hand toward the small book, but I clutched it tighter. "Why do I know her?" I asked. "Why does she know me?" His face softened, like someone weary of speaking the same truth. Because time here doesn't flow, it folds, and sometimes it folds back onto you. I took a step away from him, clutching the photograph. "Then who am I?" I whispered. The man didn't answer. Instead, he pointed behind me. I turned and found that the ledger had changed. The page with my name had grown. More ink, more words. It now read, "Room undefined. Status, dual occupancy. Memory crossover detected." Beneath it, another name had appeared. Clara Bell. Written again. Only this time, no date, no time. Just the word. Now. The bell rang again. Louder. Closer. This time the sound came from above, from room 313. The storm outside intensified, thunder shaking the ground beneath me. "She's calling you back," the old man said, retreating toward the shadows. "You have something to return." The door to the room opened, slowly on its own. Beyond it, the hallway no longer led to where I came from. It led upward, toward the stairs, toward the storm, toward her. I tucked the photograph inside the book and stepped into the hall. There was no other way now. The stairs groaned beneath my feet as I climbed, the walls closing in tighter with every step. The flickering lights along the corridor offered just enough glow to see the peeling wallpaper, which now bore faint patterns. Eyes, mirrors, doors, drawn like charcoal sketches that watched as I passed. At the top of the stairs, room 313 awaited, its door slightly ajar. Rain pounded against the windows at the end of the hall, and the storm seemed to whisper my name with every gust of wind. I pushed the door open slowly. The room looked exactly as I had left it. The fireplace was dark, the bed untouched, the vanity mirror clean, too clean, like it had been waiting for my reflection. But the air felt different, charged, heavy, like something had arrived before me. The broken figurine from the first night was gone. In its place, a new one stood, whole, polished. And this time, it wasn't Clara. It was me. I approached cautiously, heart thudding. The figurine wore the same clothes I had on now, every detail replicated in porcelain. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open slightly, as if trying to speak. I picked it up gently and found something etched into the base in gold. She returned. The moment I read it, the mirror fogged over. And then, like breath clearing from the inside, a message appeared in looping script. You still owe her. I backed away from the vanity, unable to look at the figurine in my hands. The door behind me shut on its own with a loud click. Thunder cracked overhead. The light bulb in the chandelier blinked once, then shattered. Darkness rushed in, thick, alive, filled with the sound of quiet breathing all around me. Then, from the mirror, a voice I knew and feared in equal measure. Clara's. The ledger remembers, she said, but memory alone can't release you. You have to finish it. The candles in the room lit themselves, one by one, casting long shadows against the walls. The photograph I had found earlier lay now on the bed, though I'd never taken it out, of the book. A line of red ink had been drawn across the faces, mine and Clara's, binding them together. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the image, as rain hammered the windows like impatient fingers. The hotel was watching, waiting. And I finally understood. The only way out was through the truth neither of us had dared to write. I didn't sleep that night, not even a moment. I sat in silence, staring at the photo on the bed until the candlelight flickered low. My thoughts spun in circles. Clara, the ledger, the mirror, the storm that never truly passed. And now, the figurine that bore my likeness. Something had changed, not just in the room, but in me. I felt heavier, as if carrying the weight of another person's memories alongside my own. The storm outside swelled again, thunder vibrating through the floorboards like distant footsteps. Drawn by instinct, I got down on my knees and lifted the edge of the rug. The floor beneath was scratched, deep, uneven gouges cut into the wood like something had tried to claw its way out. Or in. In the center was a square outline, slightly raised, a trapdoor. I don't remember seeing it before, but it was there now, plain as day. I ran my fingers along its edges. The same strange symbols from the mirror frame were carved into the wood. They pulsed under my touch. Not with light, but with heat. I found a groove and lifted it carefully. The door opened with a groan, releasing a wave of cold air that smelled of soil, metal, and something older than either. I held the candle near the opening and peered inside. Wooden stairs led downward into the dark. The space was too narrow to be part of the hotel's original design, more like it had been carved in secret. Every instinct told me not to go, but I couldn't turn away. The answer was down there. I could feel it. With each step, the sounds of the storm grew more distant, muffled by layers of stone and time. The walls were rough, damp, and streaked with something that might have been rust or blood. It was impossible to tell. I reached the bottom and found a low-ceilinged corridor lit by oil lamps that burned without flame. The air was heavy and still, like breath held for far too long. and at the end of the corridor stood a wooden door with no handle, only a carving at its center, a mirror, split in two. I reached out and placed my hand on the door. It responded instantly, pulling inward, without sound. Beyond it was a room unlike any I had seen in the hotel, round, stone-lined, and cold. At its center stood a table covered in old photographs. Some I recognized: Clara, the soldier, the maid. Others were strangers, and among them, more pictures of me. Different clothes, different eras, but all the same face. One photograph sat apart from the others, framed in black. I picked it up with trembling hands. It showed Clara and I, but this time, she held my hand like a mother. My breath caught. I turned the photo over, hoping for a date or a note. Anything to explain it. There was only one line, written in faded ink. She was always mine, even when she forgot. I stared at the words, trying to make sense of the impossible. Clara couldn't be my mother. I'd never known her. And yet, my hands trembled with a familiarity I couldn't explain. Like some part of me recognized the truth before my mind did. The room pulsed around me. Subtle, rhythmic, like a buried heartbeat beneath the stone. I set the photograph down and turned toward the rest of the room. Bookshelves lined the curved walls, filled with worn journals, old hotel ledgers, guest books, all marked with the same symbol, a broken mirror. I pulled one at random. Inside were sketches, notes, lists of names. Some were crossed out, others underlined. Some pages were completely blacked out with thick charcoal strokes. It felt like I was reading the diary of the hotel itself, a consciousness trying to recall all the souls it had trapped and twisted. A sudden creak echoed behind me. I spun around. The door I'd come through was gone, just blank stone now, sealed shut as if it had never existed. I was trapped again. Of course I was. I turned back to the table, and now the photographs had changed. Clara's face had aged. Mine had not. In each image, I remained the same while she grew older. Her expressions changed from joyful to weary to hollow. One image showed her asleep in a hospital bed. I was sitting beside her, untouched by time. Reached out, drawn to the frame, but the photo dissolved into ash the moment my fingers brushed its edge. The ash drifted upward, swirling in a slow spiral before vanishing. In its place sat something small and smooth, a ring, silver, delicate. Inscribed inside were the words, "Return what was kept." I slipped it into my pocket, unsure why I needed to. The air grew colder, the walls darker. The only light now came from a doorway I hadn't seen before, flickering like firelight from behind velvet curtains. I walked toward it slowly, my footsteps echoing against the stone. Behind the curtain was a narrow hallway lined with mirrors, tall, narrow, and old, none reflecting me. They showed other versions of room 313, other guests, some crying, some laughing. One woman banged her fists against the glass. Another sat, still, eyes hollow. In the last mirror, I saw Clara. She stood at the vanity, brushing her hair, humming the same tune I'd heard days ago. Her reflection looked up suddenly, locking eyes with me across time. She didn't speak. She only mouthed one word: home. I reached out to touch the glass, but the moment my fingers neared it, The mirror fogged over from the inside. Her image vanished, swallowed by silver mist. I stood there, breathing heavily, surrounded by distorted reflections of others who had been here before me. Versions of myself that had stayed, wandered, faded. My name whispered faintly from every frame, like the hallway itself was trying to remind me of something I never consented to forget. Each step forward felt heavier, like I was walking through the grief of someone else's story. The hallway ended in a small circular chamber. A well sat at its center, ancient, stone-lined, and covered by a rusted grate. The air was thick with moisture and something else, an emotion I couldn't name. Regret, maybe. Loss. Pain too old for language. As I stepped closer, I noticed a small plaque affixed to the wall behind it. It read, "What you bury here stays, unless it belongs to someone else." I didn't know what it meant, but something inside me did. The ring in my pocket pulsed, faint but real. I knelt beside the grate and peered down into the well. Nothing but darkness stared back. No water, no bottom. But a sound drifted up, soft, rhythmic, like breathing. Then a voice, quiet and near. "You took something that wasn't yours." I looked around. No one. The voice again, this time behind me. "You wore it. You lived it. But you forgot the debt." I clutched the ring tighter, heart racing. "I don't understand," I whispered. Was it hers? The silence that followed was answer enough. The ring in my hand grew warm, then hot, until I had to release it. It clattered onto the grate, glowing faintly with a silver-blue hue. Slowly, it rolled toward the center of the bars, then dropped through. No splash. No echo. Just silence. And then, something rose. Not a person. Not a shadow. A feeling. Thick and heavy, filling the chamber. The candles around the room blew out one by one, as if exhaled by some ancient breath. The wall behind me shimmered, and when I turned, the velvet curtain had returned. I stepped through it, now knowing the hallway would be different. It was. Shorter, narrower, lined with wallpaper torn in long vertical slashes. At the end, room 313's door stood open, but now it looked ancient, with hinges rusted and wood splintering. A voice, mine and not mine, whispered from inside, "You're almost ready." I crossed the threshold, and the room sighed as I entered, like something had been holding its breath for years, and finally exhaled. The room was no longer as I remembered it. The bed was stripped, its mattress sagging under the weight of time. The fireplace was blackened and cold, and the walls were covered in faint handprints, some child-sized, others larger, all pressed into the wallpaper like stains left by memory. In the corner, the vanity sat intact, but the mirror above it was shattered, its glass missing. In its place, a dark void pulsed gently, as though breathing with the rhythm of the house. I stepped forward cautiously. The photograph that had once lain on the bed was now nailed to the wall. The frame cracked, the glass smeared with something that looked like dried blood. My name was scrawled across the image, over and over, in a looping, frantic hand. Each time it was written, the ink changed, black, then red, then gold, then something that shimmered like wet ash. Beneath all the scribbles, I could just make out Clara's face, smiling, waiting. The floor groaned beneath me as I moved closer to the mirror. Though the glass was gone, I could see reflections dancing inside the black void. Scenes from other nights in this same room. Guests pacing, crying, disappearing. The room shifted subtly with each flicker. The walls curved inward, like they were listening. Then a faint sound emerged from the void. Soft footsteps. A child humming. The same lullaby I'd heard before, off-key and slow. The sound of Clara's voice returned. But now it was layered, echoing with age and sorrow. "You remember now," she whispered. I closed my eyes, nodding, though I didn't understand the full weight of what I was remembering. "Then you know what must be done." Her voice came from behind me. I turned slowly. The room was empty, but the air was heavy with her presence. In the corner, where the armoire had once stood, there was now only a blank wall. But something pressed against it from the other side, bulging the surface as though wanting to be let in or let out. I walked toward the wall, each step resonating like a drumbeat in a funeral march. I pressed my hand to the bulge. It was warm, alive. Beneath my palm, I felt the rhythm of a second heartbeat. Not mine, not Clara's. Something else. The storm outside raged louder than ever. And in the dark, in the place where the mirror had been, my reflection returned. But it wasn't me. It was who I would become if I stayed. And she smiled. It began with a single drop, not from the ceiling or a pipe, but from the air itself, like the room had decided it could no longer contain its sorrow. The droplet landed on the back of my hand, cold and unmistakably real. I looked up. The ceiling was intact, but more drops were forming in midair, suspended until they grew too heavy and fell. Rain. Inside. The storm outside had finally breached the walls, not through cracks or windows, but through memory. The room grew dimmer, clouded by a fine mist that clung to the air like breath on glass. Every surface glistened. Bedposts, mirrors, the wooden floor, gathering droplets like tears. The chandelier above flickered in protest, bulbs sputtering with each hiss of contact. I stepped away from the wall, watching the rain fall in patterns that made no sense. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, targeted. A shape was forming on the floor beneath the downpour. A circle. A mark I'd seen before. Carved beneath the rug the night I found the trapdoor. I reached the vanity, wiping the mist from the mirrorless frame. In the dark pane behind it, my reflection emerged slowly, not all at once, but in fragments. First my eyes, then my mouth, then a second pair of eyes behind mine. Clara's. She wasn't gone. She had never left. I whispered her name, and the glass trembled as though trying to answer. My lips moved, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. "You know the way back," the reflection said. "You just forgot how to listen." I turned to the armoire, now resealed into the wall, as if it had never been there. The bulge was gone, but the feeling remained. I knelt and pressed my ear to the floor. The rain was louder here, falling from below instead of above, as if the house had flipped its sorrow inward. I closed my eyes and heard it more clearly. Footsteps in water, the rustle of pages turning, and voices, familiar, layered, speaking at once. All of them calling one name. Mine. I stood again, disoriented, heart racing. The candlelight sputtered and flared. I looked toward the bed and gasped. A woman sat at the edge, facing away. Her hair was long and wet, soaked through as if she'd been standing in the rain for hours. She didn't move, didn't speak. But I knew. I knew who she was before I took a single step. Clara. She was here, not as a memory, not as a ghost, but as a presence that had been waiting for this exact moment. For me, I stepped closer, slowly, afraid to break the moment. The rain kept falling, silent now, as if granting us a brief ceasefire. Clara's shoulders were still, her back perfectly straight. The ends of her hair clung to the soaked fabric of her dress. I could see her breathing, slow, steady, the same rhythm I'd felt behind the wall. Clara, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of falling water. I remember you. Her head turned slightly, just enough for me to see the corner of her mouth curl into a smile. You always do, she said, her voice like a ripple in a still lake. She stood and turned, and I saw her clearly for the first time. Older than the girl in the photo, younger than the maid in the hallway, eyes full of recognition, but with a sadness that ran deeper than time. You stayed away too long, she added. This place doesn't forgive forgetfulness. I wanted to ask who she really was, what she meant to me, but I already knew. I didn't need a title. She had been part of me all along. Clara reached out and took my hand. Her touch was warm, grounding, despite the cold that surrounded us. It's not just about remembering, she said. It's about choosing what you'll carry and what you'll return. I looked around the room. It had stopped being a place. It was now a vessel of grief, of memory, of all the versions of us that had tried and failed to leave. Then help me, I said. Show me how. She nodded, then stepped past me, moving toward the vanity like she belonged there more than I ever did. She opened the drawer, now dry despite the rain. Inside was a small velvet-lined box. She placed it in my hands. This is yours, she said. I opened it slowly. Inside was a locket, tarnished silver, shaped like a tear. I clicked it open. On one side, a photo of Clara. On the other, me, as a child. I had never seen this picture before, and yet I remembered the day it was taken. A storm, a hotel, a promise whispered through a closed door. You promised not to forget me, she said. And you did. I collapsed to my knees, the locket falling into my lap. The room blurred around me, not from rain, but from tears I hadn't realized were falling. Clara knelt beside me, her hand on my back. It's not too late, she whispered. But you have to give it back. What you took, what you kept. I looked at her, confused. I don't understand. She smiled faintly, brushing wet hair from my cheek. You took my place, she said. Now I need it back. I shook my head, trying to make sense of her words. I didn't take anything, I whispered. I came here by accident. Clara tilted her head slightly, her gaze both kind and firm. "You always say that. Every time." I opened my mouth to protest, but the room answered before I could. The rain intensified, cascading from the ceiling now like a waterfall, drenching everything. The locket glowed faintly in my lap, pulsing with each beat of my heart, or hers. I couldn't tell anymore. Clara stood again and pointed toward the vanity. The mirror was no longer just a void. It showed a hallway. Room 313. A girl standing at the door, suitcase in hand, staring at the number like it held a secret. Me. Watching a version of myself I couldn't remember living. Clara stepped closer to the reflection and pressed her palm against the glass. Her image shimmered and shifted, becoming the maid, then the younger Clara, then the one I had just spoken with. "You borrowed my time," she said. "Now give it back." A sudden crack echoed through the room as a bolt of lightning split the sky outside. The chandelier above us shattered completely, crystals raining down like glass teardrops. I shielded my face, but Clara didn't move. Not a single shard touched her. She turned to me with a calm sadness that broke something deep inside. "You didn't mean to," she whispered. "But you left me here, and the room remembers." The wallpaper began to peel itself from the walls. Beneath it, words were scratched into the plaster. Names, dates, mine, hers, over and over. I stood, shaky, soaked, heart splintered. "What do I do?" I asked. "How do I fix this?" Clara walked to the center of the room, where the rain now formed a pool around her feet. "There's a door," she said, "but only one of us can use it. That's the price." The room trembled beneath us, the bed creaking violently, the windows fogging with breath that wasn't mine. "You choose," Clara continued. "You leave, or I do. But someone stays. That's how it's always been." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The floor beneath me felt like water now, shifting, uncertain. I looked at Clara, her hand extended, patient, forgiving. "Why me?" I asked. She smiled, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "Because you're the one who remembers." Behind her, the mirror pulsed again. This time, it showed the room empty, still, waiting. And I finally understood. The room wasn't haunted by her. It was haunted by what I had forgotten. The locket in my hand pulsed again, a final heartbeat echoing through silver and memory. I took a step forward, feeling the water rise around my ankles. Clara didn't move. Her eyes never left mine. Behind her, the mirror grew brighter, no longer showing scenes or reflections, just light, pure, white, endless. "This is it," she said gently. "The moment we break the loop, or bind it forever." I wanted to run, to scream, to disappear, but the room would never let me leave without a cost. The walls closed in slowly, not with violence, but with finality. The rain had stopped falling, but it hadn't stopped being. It hung in the air like a suspended decision. Clara reached for me again. "You didn't mean to stay," she said. "You did. And now you have to choose." My voice cracked as I answered. "I don't want to forget again." She nodded. "Then don't. But one of us has to stay so the other can remember." I looked toward the door. It was open now, wide, leading not into a hallway, but into a field soaked in sunlight and wind, an impossible image in a hotel built on shadows. I looked back to the mirror, now pulsing with a darker glow. A heartbeat that wasn't mine. A voice that wasn't Clara's whispered from it. Choose. My heart split between longing and guilt, love and fear. If I leave, I asked softly, what happens to you? Clara's smile wavered. I disappear, or I become the room. I held the locket tightly, tears running down my face. I stepped toward her. The floor rippled beneath us. The light in the mirror flared once. The door behind me whispered my name. I opened the locket one last time and looked at her picture. You were never meant to be forgotten, I said. Clara stepped back, her hands dropping to her sides. Then, remember me, she whispered, even if I can't. And then, with my breath caught between choice and consequence, I turned. I didn't know what I'd chosen, only that it was done. The moment I turned, the room responded like it had been holding its breath. A deep creaking groaned through the walls, the chandelier above swayed once more, and the rain vanished as if it had never fallen. The light through the door dimmed slowly, fading into gray, and when I stepped forward, I wasn't in the hallway. I was somewhere in between. The carpet beneath me was patterned with unfamiliar shapes, shifting subtly, like ripples in water. Time didn't feel linear here. Neither did memory. The mirror stood again in front of me, whole, its surface perfectly clean. My reflection waited. It moved when I did. No delays, no flickers, just me. But I didn't recognize her anymore. Her eyes were older, her expression unsure. Behind her, behind me, shadows moved through the mist, shapes I couldn't define. The locket hung around my neck, warm against my chest, but heavier than before, like it carried not just a photo, but a piece of someone else's life. Maybe it always had. A hallway emerged from the mist, leading in both directions. Each side looked the same. Walls of pale blue, framed photos of people I didn't know, though some bore my face. I began walking, unsure which direction I'd chosen. My steps echoed strangely, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind. I passed a mirror, then another. Some were broken, some were clean. In one, I saw myself as a child, coloring with a woman I couldn't name. In another, I was older, standing in a field beneath a dark sky. Every version of me seemed to be searching for something. Whispers filled the air, not loud, but persistent. Questions I didn't understand. Where did you leave her? Why did you let go? Was she real or just yours? I pressed my hands to my ears, but the voices came from inside, curling between my ribs like breath turned backward. I stopped walking. The locket around my neck pulsed again, and I looked down at it. The clasp had reopened on its own. Inside, the photos had changed. Clara was gone. In her place, a blank space. And on my side, my face had aged. I dropped to my knees, overwhelmed by the sense that nothing I remembered belonged entirely to me. My life, my past, felt borrowed, patched together from fragments someone else had left behind. Who was I? Before this? I whispered into the mist. No answer came. Only a mirror ahead, taller than the others. Its frame was scorched black. At its center, the surface shimmered like oil over water. I stood, drawn forward, afraid and needing to know. My reflection appeared again, but this time, she smiled first. I approached the mirror slowly, heart pounding with each step. My reflection didn't match me anymore. Her hair was dry, her clothes clean. She stood taller, more certain, and yet, she was still me. A version untouched by the rain, by the shadows, by the room. She raised her hand. I mirrored her. But when I reached the surface, it didn't feel like glass. It was warm, soft, like skin stretched thin across something waiting. My reflection leaned forward and mouthed 3 words. You stayed behind. I stumbled back, breath caught in my throat. The hallway around me rippled like water disturbed by motion. Paintings melted into new forms. Portraits of strangers became photographs of me in places I'd never been. One showed me dancing barefoot in a garden. Another, weeping in a church pew. A third, standing before a grave that bore no name. The voices returned, louder now. Choose a memory. Claim a name. We need to know who left. My knees buckled, and I pressed my back against the wall, shaking. I pulled the locket from around my neck and held it in my palm. It was cold again, the clasp sealed tight. Was she real? I asked aloud, though I didn't know who I was speaking to. The hallway didn't answer. The mirrors darkened, their glass frosted over with breath. I stood and turned in place, searching for something solid, something mine. But every image I passed showed Clara, in childhood, in her teens, holding a baby, holding my hand. Or was it me holding hers? Our roles kept shifting, identity blurred like rain on a window. At the end of the corridor, a door appeared, smaller than the others, white with a brass handle and a single word etched into its center before. I stepped toward it, the floor beneath me soft, like walking on fabric stretched too thin. I reached the door and paused, hand on the knob. The locket grew warm again, then hot. I opened the clasp. This time, both sides were blank. No photos, only the faint imprint of where they used to be. A silence deeper than thought fell over me. I opened the door. Inside was a single room. Wooden floors, pale walls, a window that looked out onto a gray sky. A table in the center with a single object placed upon it, a birth certificate. I stepped closer, my fingers brushing the edges. My name was there. But the parent listed wasn't Clara. It was me, my handwriting, my signature. My name scrawled where hers should have been. I gasped, stepping back, heart thundering. The storm outside resumed in full force. And in the corner of the room sat a crib. I stared at the crib, frozen. It was old, wooden, painted white, but chipped with age. A mobile spun slowly above it, its rusted stars creaking as they turned in rhythm with the storm. I stepped forward, each movement reluctant, as if my body understood something my mind had yet to catch. The air in the room thickened, sweet with the scent of lavender and something metallic. My fingers trembled as I gripped the edge and leaned, and the crib was empty, but not silent. A faint sound rose from within, soft humming, the same lullaby I had heard in the hallway, in the mirror, in the dreams I hadn't realized were memories. It wasn't Clara's voice. It was mine. Younger, calmer, as if captured in time, singing to someone I'd once known and then left behind. I sank to my knees, gripping the edge, tears falling freely now. I left you, I whispered to no one and to everyone. I thought I was saving myself. Behind me, the door creaked shut. The walls darkened. The mobile stopped spinning. I turned and found the room had changed again. The window was gone. The walls now mirrored. Every side of the space reflected versions of me, laughing, aging, hiding. Clara was nowhere. Only I remained, multiplied endlessly, looping through moments of denial and rediscovery. I screamed. Not in fear, but in grief. For all the versions I'd abandoned, for the one that stayed behind. The mirrors flickered and shimmered, then fractured, not with shattering violence, but like melting wax. The reflections dissolved, leaving only fog. And then, one by one, the voices returned. You weren't supposed to forget. You promised to carry her. She waited for you. I clutched the locket, pressing it to my chest. I remember now, I said through clenched teeth. I remember everything. The crib pulsed behind me, and from within it came a single breath, alive. I turned to find the crib filled with mist, soft and glowing. Within it, a child's shape flickered in and out of form. Not Clara, not me, but something between us. A memory made flesh. A life suspended in sorrow. I reached out instinctively, and the child opened its eyes, deep, dark, and knowing. My breath caught. Who are you? I asked. The answer came not in words, but in feeling. This was the part of us that was never allowed to be whole, the one forgotten by both. And now, it wanted to come home. I reached into the crib, my fingers passing through the mist like warm breath against glass. The child didn't flinch. Its eyes held mine with a patience far too old for its size. I lifted it gently, surprised by the weight. It felt real, solid, anchored, as if memory had finally decided to take form. The storm outside calmed in that instant, fading to a gentle patter. The room responded with warmth, a hush falling over everything like a held note. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest. I felt like a witness. The mirrors around the room lit softly from within. Each one now reflected not just me, but Clara as well. Sometimes beside me, sometimes behind. We weren't separate anymore. We never had been. She was the part I'd locked away, the grief I refused to name, the mother I had made of myself and forgotten. And the child, it was the truth we'd buried to survive. It's time, I whispered, more to the room than to the child. No more staying behind. A door appeared in the far wall, simple, wooden, carved with the same symbol as the trapdoor from before, the circle with a break in it. I approached slowly, the child in my arms, the locket now glowing gently against my chest. Behind me, the mirrors began to fade, one by one, until only darkness remained where reflections had been. I paused at the door, hand on the knob. Where does it lead? I asked aloud. Clara's voice answered, soft and certain. Forward. I turned the handle. Light poured in. Not from lamps, not from candles, but from something warmer, fuller. The storm behind me fell silent. The room faded with a sigh. As I stepped through the door, the child stirred slightly in my arms. Not crying, just shifting, as if adjusting to the weight of being remembered. The hallway ahead was blank, clean, unmarked by time or sorrow, and in the distance, for the first time, I heard laughter. Mine, hers, ours, returning. And as the door closed behind me, I felt the house exhale. Not in anger, not in grief, but in release. The guest ledger would still turn its pages. Room 313 would still flicker into being for those who needed it. But our entry was complete. Clara's wait had ended. My forgetting was forgiven. And the child carried forward not the burden of memory, but its truth. The light faded behind me the moment the door closed, leaving me once again in a corridor I didn't recognize. No windows, no mirrors, just soft, flickering bulbs that hummed like distant thunder. I held the child close, though their weight had grown lighter, as if memory had begun to fade from their form. The locket pulsed faintly against my chest, guiding me forward. The silence in this hallway wasn't peaceful. It was charged, like the breath before a scream. I walked slowly, the carpet beneath my feet patterned with swirling clouds, light gray and silver, moving subtly as I stepped. At the end of the hall was a large wooden door unlike the others. Tall, narrow, covered, in dozens of brass room numbers nailed one over the other, all different, all scratched out. At the top, in fresh red paint, was a final number, 313. I reached out and knocked once. The door didn't open, but thunder rumbled directly above me, as if the storm had been waiting. The walls around me began to darken, not with shadow, but with water. Lines of rain ran down the wallpaper like tears from a ceiling I couldn't see. And then, without warning, the door swung inward with a slow, groaning creak. Inside was room 313 again, but broken, hollow. The furniture was gone, the floor warped. The bed frame collapsed. At the center of the room was a single chair, and in it, a figure, dressed in my clothes, staring out the window into a world I couldn't see. I stepped inside, clutching the child tighter. The room didn't resist this time. It welcomed me, like breath drawn into lungs. The figure in the chair didn't move. Not until I was just behind her. And then, she turned. Her face was mine, but not the me I was now. The me I had been when I first arrived. Eyes wide, lost, still trapped, still believing she'd just checked in for the night. She blinked once and spoke with a voice I had almost forgotten. You never left. My throat tightened. I tried, I whispered. I thought I did. The other me smiled faintly. Everyone does. The rain outside pounded harder, but it wasn't hitting glass. It was hitting memory. Walls, skin. Are you me? I asked. She nodded. I'm who stayed when you turned away. I looked down at the child, now warm and heavy in my arms again. Then what happens if I stay too? Her smile vanished. Then you forget again. And it all begins once more. I stepped around the chair and faced her fully. Her expression was soft, but her eyes held centuries of sorrow. "You look like me," I said quietly, "but you feel older." She nodded, slowly. "Time here isn't measured in hours. It's measured in memory." She looked at the child in my arms. "And forgetting is how the storm begins." The words rang in my chest, echoing through the locket at my neck. "Then this," I began, holding the child tighter. "This is what breaks the cycle." Her voice was almost a whisper. "If you let it." She reached toward me, her hand stopping just short of mine. "You don't have to carry her anymore," she said. "You just have to let her become herself." I looked down. The child's eyes were open, watching both of us. They blinked once, slow, patient. I realized then that I'd been holding not a burden, but a choice. A memory waiting to be lived instead of carried. My grip loosened. The child stepped down from my arms and walked forward, barefoot, unafraid, toward the broken version of me in the chair. The rain began to soften, not stop, just shift. It no longer sounded like sorrow. It sounded like release. The walls of the room shimmered, and the outlines of doors began to form where none had been. Not just one, dozens, each one marked with a name. Clara, Belle, me. Versions of me I had never been, and others I'd long buried. The child turned back and smiled, then pointed at one of the doors. It was blank, unnamed, open, waiting. The other version of me stood slowly, stepping away from the window. Her features changed as she moved, softening, fading, becoming something less familiar and more symbolic. The longer I looked at her, the more she became everyone I had once been, and no one at all. "Will I forget again?" I asked. She shook her head. "Only if you stop choosing to remember." Then she turned and walked toward a different door, the one marked Clara. She paused before entering. "Tell her," I waited. And then she was gone. I stood alone again in room 313, but it no longer felt haunted. It felt hollowed, emptied, as though the room had finally exhaled. The mirrors were gone. The rain slowed to a whisper. The chandelier above didn't swing. I looked down at the locket, still warm, still glowing, and I realized the storm hadn't ended. It had simply passed through me. The child waited at the threshold, holding open the door with no name. And for the first time, I stepped forward, not to escape the room, but to leave it behind. As I crossed the threshold of the nameless door, the floor beneath my feet didn't creak. For the first time since arriving at the hotel, nothing resisted me. The hallway beyond was white, clean, undecorated. The silence here was deep, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, when everything breathes, in unison with the earth. The air smelled like old paper and freshly laundered linen. The child walked a few steps ahead, leading me, as if they'd always known a path I had never seen. As we moved forward, doors opened on their own along the corridor. Inside each, scenes revealed themselves, fragments of lives I hadn't lived, but somehow felt were mine. In one, Clara read to me beneath a golden lamp. In another, I danced in the rain, laughing with someone faceless but comforting. Each vision was fleeting, like borrowed memories. Each whispered, "This could have been." None of them hurt. They only left behind a strange ache, part nostalgia, part acceptance. We stopped in front of a smaller door, nearly hidden. At its center was a single mark, the incomplete spiral, the same from the mirror and the book. The child turned and looked up at me. Their eyes didn't ask permission. They offered understanding. I opened the door. Inside was only a desk, a pen, and a blank book. The last page quivered slightly in a breeze that came from nowhere. Beside it sat a note in delicate handwriting. "Someone must always write the end." I sat down in the chair, which didn't groan beneath me. I picked up the pen, already wet with ink. My hands didn't shake anymore. Not from fear, not from uncertainty. I looked at the child. They nodded and sat cross-legged on the floor, waiting, like someone ready to hear a bedtime story. I began to write. Not with haste, not with pain, but with the quiet reverence of someone who finally understood the weight of remembering and the power of choosing not to forget. The first line was simple. I came to room 3113 during a storm. As I wrote, the corridor began to fade, not into destruction, but into dissolution. The walls turned to wind, the ceiling to clouds, the floor to soft rain on old stone. The child smiled, and with it, warmth spread through me. Not in the body, but in the soul. Not heat, but peace. A memory finally finding its place. And there, at the end of the corridor, in front of a story that now belonged to me alone, I realized the room had never been the prison. Forgetting had. I wrote until the ink faded, until my fingers ached and my heart felt emptied and full at once. When I looked up, the child was gone, but the warmth remained. A final word appeared on the page in handwriting that wasn't mine. "Thank you." I closed the book gently. The desk dissolved beneath my hands, and the pen fell into mist. The door behind me had vanished. Ahead, the corridor now narrowed into a single straight path made of light. The spiral on the last door pulsed gently, now complete, no longer broken, no longer looping. I approached it slowly, the locket on my chest cold again, no longer glowing, no longer heavy. I removed it and laid it on the ground. It didn't vanish. It didn't burn. It simply rested. A relic no longer needed. My name echoed faintly through the hallway one last time. Not a warning, not a beckon, just a farewell. I stepped through the door. There was no storm, just stillness. And in that stillness, I finally understood. Room 313 had never been about ghosts or hauntings. It had always been about memory, about unfinished grief, and the quiet violence of forgetting, about the way we trap ourselves in rooms built from pain and pretend we don't hold the keys. I walked forward, not to escape, but to arrive, and far. Behind me, in the place where rain once fell indoors, the room stood quiet, watching, waiting, not to claim someone new, but to receive the next soul ready to remember. I thought I had left. Truly, I did. But when I opened my eyes, I was standing in the lobby of the Hollow Pines Inn, exactly where I had first arrived. The storm outside had passed, the windows misted with condensation, and the morning light filtered in through the lace curtains like nothing had ever been wrong. My suitcase rested beside me, untouched. The receptionist, same hollow smile, same unreadable eyes, stood behind the desk, nodding as if no time had passed at all. I turned in a slow circle. Everything looked the same. The ticking of the grandfather clock, the distant clink of silverware in the breakfast room, the smell of overripe flowers from the vase near the door. And yet, everything felt different. Not wrong exactly, but sharpened, awake. The hotel didn't seem haunted anymore. It seemed conscious, alert, as if it had been sleeping for years, and now, stirred by my remembering, had opened its eyes. I walked to the desk. "Is my room ready?" I asked, testing the edges of the moment. The man behind the counter didn't check the registry. He simply slid a key toward me. Brass. Heavy. The tag read 313. I didn't flinch. "Is this a mistake?" I asked. "I was told." But I stopped. Because no one had told me anything. No one ever did. "It's always been your room," he said, voice soft. "We've just been waiting for you to return." I took the key. It felt different in my hand this time. Not cold or heavy, but warm, familiar. I looked toward the elevator. Its doors were open, waiting. No sounds, no footsteps, no whispers. I stepped in. The moment the doors closed, the lights above flickered. Not from electricity, but like blinking eyes. The elevator didn't move. Not up, not down. It just breathed. The silence inside was suffocating, filled with all the things I still hadn't said aloud. When the doors opened again, the hallway was no longer empty. All the doors were open. All the rooms had eyes. I stepped out slowly, the air heavy with scent. Lavender, ash, old rain. The walls pulsed softly with some internal rhythm, like breath behind plaster. As I passed each room, I couldn't help but glance inside. Some were frozen in time, beds unmade, cups of tea still steaming, mirrors cracked. Others were filled, with motionless figures standing in the corners, backs turned, waiting for a cue that never came. I didn't speak. I didn't run. I walked forward, as if drawn on a line that had already been written. Room 313 stood at the end of the hall, but it wasn't just a door anymore. The wood pulsed slightly, alive beneath its carved frame. The brass numbers shimmered faintly, and behind them I heard breath. Not mine, not Clara's. Something deeper. The room knew I was here. It had always known. I reached out with the key, hesitating for the briefest second. Then I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Not as a guest, not as a prisoner, but as someone who had once tried to leave and failed. The room greeted me like a memory. Everything in place. The vanity, the bed, the mirror, now whole again, but darker than glass. The chandelier swayed even though the air was still. The child was gone. Clara was gone. All that remained was the echo of 100 names whispered behind the walls. I closed the door gently behind me. It didn't click. It sighed, as if the room had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. I stepped toward the mirror. My reflection looked back. But now, she waited. She didn't mimic. She didn't blink. Her eyes were darker, her smile softer, sadder. I touched the surface and it rippled like water. The image shifted. Behind me stood the old man from the guest ledger, holding an open book. He said nothing. He only wrote. Page after page, his quill scratching louder than the storm ever had. I turned quickly. No one was there. But the scratching continued, knelt by the vanity, and opened the drawer. This time, it was empty. No keys, no photographs, no locket. Only a folded piece of parchment. I opened it slowly. Inside were 3 words written in the same looping hand I'd seen once before. It begins again. The mirror dimmed. The walls pulsed. And I realized, with a deep, unshakable certainty, that the room wasn't done with me, because room 313 had only just woken up. I stood slowly, the note still trembling in my hand. The mirror pulsed once, more, and this time the surface cracked, not with sound, but with light. A thin, glowing line stretched diagonally across it, then paused, as if the room were waiting for permission to continue. I stepped back, unsure. The crack widened, and, through it, I didn't see myself anymore. I saw the hallway again, but not the one I'd just walked through. It was older, flickering, and at the far end stood Clara. She looked different now, calmer, clearer. She reached toward the mirror from her side. Her eyes met mine, but this time, she didn't mouth anything. She just nodded, slowly, and then stepped back. Behind her, the room she stood in closed like a curtain drawn by unseen hands. The crack in the glass sealed, and my reflection returned. Only now. It wasn't mine. It was the version of me I'd left behind, the one who never chose. She blinked once and smiled. I turned from the mirror and faced the room. The chandelier swung gently now, as if moved by a tide. On the wall, a new door appeared, smaller than the rest. No handle, no hinges, just a frame and a number, 303 I approached it, hand hovering where a knob should have been. The air pressed against my palm like skin. It wanted to open. It was asking, inviting. But the moment I touched it, I heard something else. A sound I hadn't heard since the first night. 3 slow knocks from inside the armoire. The sound froze me in place. I turned. The armoire stood silent, untouched. But the knock came again. Louder. Sharper. In a whisper through the rainless air. We remember. My heart raced. The mirror darkened behind me. The chandelier dimmed. And then, slowly, the armoire creaked open on its own. Inside, nothing. Just a black coat hanging from a rusted hook and a pair of shoes neatly placed on the floor. But the coat, it was mine. I stepped closer, drawn by something deeper than memory. I reached inside and touched the fabric, cold, damp, familiar. As I pulled it toward me, a folded piece of paper slipped from the pocket and landed at my feet. I picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. Written in the same hand as the ledger, the same hand as the guest book, were 5 words. Your stay is not over. I dropped the note. It drifted to the floor like a falling leaf, landing beside the shoes I now knew I'd worn before. The coat clung to my arm, damp not from rain, but from the weight of recognition. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was part of the room, part of its memory, its echo. I turned slowly to face the mirror again. My reflection stood still, but the room around her had changed. She was smiling wider now. Behind her, a new figure appeared. A woman I didn't recognize. Yet. The lights above buzzed once and went out. Darkness claimed the space, but it didn't feel empty. The room was full of breath. Whispers moved through the air like wind in a sealed space. You stayed. You returned. You forgot. I closed my eyes, unable to breathe. And then, in the deepest part of the silence, I heard something softer than sound. A heartbeat. Not mine, not Clara's. The room's. Awake, listening. Soft knock came from the door I had entered minutes or years ago. I didn't move to open it. I already knew what was on the other side. Another version, another guest, another beginning. And I had become the welcome. The whisper behind, the wall, the creak in the floorboards, the echo in the mirror. I had always feared this room, but now I understood. It didn't haunt people. It remembered them. And once remembered, you never truly left. Somewhere down the hall, the guest ledger opened on its own. A pen scratched a new name across the bottom of the page, the ink still wet, the ending still unwritten. And somewhere deeper within the hotel, rain began to fall again. Soft, steady, rhythmic. The kind of rain that brings someone new to the doorstep of Hollow Pines. The kind of storm that doesn't wash things away, but brings them home. I sat at the vanity once more, hands folded neatly in my lap. The mirror was calm now. Still. But I waited, patient and silent, knowing what would come. And when the knock finally echoed through the door again, I smiled, because room 313 was awake, and I was ready to greet whoever arrived next. There is a room where silence breathes, where rain seeps in through cracks of grief, where mirrors speak in voiceless tongues, and time folds in upon the young. It waits behind a numbered door, not locked, but never less than more, for those who seek to leave the past, yet find themselves returned at last. It does not haunt. It does not chase. It simply holds your quiet place, where versions sleep, where names remain, where memory rewrites the pain. Some call it cursed. Some call it home. Some vanish in its walls alone. But if you knock and hear it breathe, then you're the one who did not leave. So light the lamp and take your key. The room remembers. You, not me. And if you wake to whispered rain, you've found your way to 313 again.